Hello everyone, my name is Jinkitsu and today we're going to be taking a look at the fighter class as a whole. Prior to this, I only really looked at subclasses, but it has been a while since I've made a video, so I figured why not come back and make a video on my favorite class personally. It's not really a secret, if you know me at all, that fighter is my favorite class. At this point, not for 2024, but I've experienced pretty much every class, including things like Artificer, Blood Hunter, and all of those. And I always find myself being drawn back to fighter because I love fighters so much, and I'm actually really excited to talk about it today. Well, it might be an extended video. We'll see. I don't really know how long this'll last. I do want to apologize that it has been a while since I've made a video. I've been kind of burnt out a bit on content creation and stuff. But you know what? It's alright. We're here now, and I'm actually really, really excited to talk about fighters today. So, I guess to start things off, what is the fighter? You know, you have so many classes in Dungeons and Dragons. Well, you have 12 classes in 5th edition, and you have things that range from super stealthy and kind of taking advantage of the shadows using sneak attacks and being experts at picking locks, all the way to crazy spellcasters who have studied the weave of the universe and are able to turn that into spells. And perhaps the least fantastical, depending on how you look at it, class is the fighter. And a lot of people, I think, give fighter some flack because it is not very fantastical. You think that, oh my gosh, you get to play D&D. You know, you're talking with your friends and everyone's talking about, I wanna be able to smite dragons, and I wanna be able to contact patrons from other worlds. And almost every single time that I've said I wanted to play a fighter, I always kind of get a side eye of, well, why would you play a fighter? You know, fighters are just kind of normal people. They just use weapons, and they don't really do much in particular. And honestly, that's kind of why I like them. I think fighters serve as a really excellent blank slate to build on. And having that sort of blank slate, in my opinion, really opens the avenue to a lot of very different ways to build and play a fighter. Just recently, in a Curse of Strahd game, I had a fighter who specialized in using a crossbow. But in addition to that, she had the healer feat. She was kind of a battle master in a sense. Sorry, not a battle... Well, she was a battle master, but she was like a warlord in a sense, giving up her own attacks and granting advantage, you know, to help other people shine, and she was the party's healer. In other games, I've played Eldritch Knights who could, you know, shore up all of their defenses, and even though they weren't offensively very strong, they were just an indomitable wall that stood in front of everybody. And I've even had fighters who focused all in on damage and were alpha strikers that would eliminate threats before they can even act. And so I do think that fighters are such an amazing canvas for building any sort of character that you would like to. Even if you think of, you know, you think of things like high fantasy novels, you think of, let's say, like Lord of the Rings, right? Gandalf could be an Eldritch Knight. I mean, he's probably more of like a level 20 wizard, level 20 fighter, but he could be an Eldritch Knight. You have Aragorn, who could be, you know, a bow fighter, or Legolas, who's also a bow fighter. You have Gimli, who's probably just like a fighter using an axe, and all of the hobbits who are fighters using short swords and nimble movements. Fighters are just never at... You're never lost for options when it comes to fighter. And I think that's my favorite part of the class, is you play something like a cleric, you are sort of shoehorned into being someone who worships a deity and embraces the power of that deity. And of course, you could reflavor things, but with fighters, you don't really have to. You know, as a fighter, you could take lots of feats that really build into that sort of divine warrior. And that stuff we'll talk more about later. Sorry, I do get very impassioned when I talk about fighter. I think fighter is just such an awesome class. And I think that while people call fighter boring, I think that's like calling an empty easel boring. Because it's what you do with your paints and what you do with your skills and your feats and all of those that really define a fighter rather than just fighter the class. So we'll talk about that today. I'm sure I'm going to be giving lots of examples and really just yapping a lot about fighter because, again, it's my favorite class in the entire game. So we can go ahead and get to the core fighter traits. Sorry, I just need to make timestamps real quick. So yeah, let's just get right into it. So you have your fighter. Your primary ability is strength or dexterity. Generally, if you're going to be going a ranged fighter, you're going to want to prioritize dexterity. If you're going a rapier-wielding fighter, you'd want to use dexterity. But, of course, there's also your fighters who carry great swords and great mauls who would want to prioritize strength, using heavy armors and whatnot. Either way, it is... Yeah, I mean, it's true. Your primary ability is strength or dexterity, and generally that's going to be the stat you want to get to 20 first. Your hit die is a d10 per fighter level, which is the second highest hit die. You're probably going to be on the front lines, which is... well, that's not true. You're mostly going to be on the front lines if you decide to be a melee fighter, so being able to have that those extra hit points is really solid. And even if you're a ranged fighter... You didn't get this advice from me, but maybe you could go ahead and afford to dump a little constitution and kind of get carried by your hit dice to give you the health that you need. Your saving throw proficiencies are strength and constitution. I don't know if I've talked about this before, but every class seems to have a more... what's the word? To have a saving throw that is more useful and a saving throw that is less useful, I suppose. Generally, strength, intelligence, and charisma saving throws are the ones you see less of, while dexterity, constitution, and wisdom are the ones you see more of. And so fighter is all in on the physical aspect with strength and constitution. I do think strength saving throws are probably less common than things like charisma or intelligence. And generally, failing a strength saving throw is not as much of a hindrance as failing one of those other ones. Charisma and intelligence saving throws probably come from very scary creatures that are going to be doing terrible things to you, much more than perhaps a strength saving throw. Granted, if you're against something like a purple worm, you're going to be happy you have those strength saving throws. You're not going to be getting swallowed. Or, resisting the getting pushed back, resisting being toppled. There's still use for them, especially with most situations the fighter will find themselves in. And we'll talk about some more stuff later that kind of factors into that. In addition to that, you get constitution saving throws, which are, in my opinion, probably some of the most important saving throws. I think constitution is one of those skills that's just always useful, and constitution saving throws allow you to trudge through a lot of extremely debilitating effects. Especially ones that could really hinder the things that you would like to do as a fighter. So being able to do that, being able to kind of have an extra buffer for things like exhaustion, having an extra buffer for a lot of spells is really nice on a fighter. Your skill proficiencies. So you get to choose 2, which is, I believe, the lowest amount. Not that it is lower than everything else, but I think the lowest amount across all the classes that you can get is 2. And I think a few classes get 2. But you get to choose between acrobatics, animal handling, athletics, history, insight, intimidation, persuasion, perception, or survival, which is a pretty solid list and kind of harkens to what I was talking about earlier. If you want to build maybe a charismatic fighter who wields a rapier and is the swift talking duelist, you can do things like your persuasion and your insight to really build into that. If you want to be the hardened ranger who traverses the outlands, you have animal handling, you have survival, you have perception. Or, I've even had a character who was an investigator who took things like perception and history. I think that the list for skill proficiencies is really solid. You can, not to be rude or anything, but you can leave kind of the nerdy stuff, like, your arcana, your nature, your religion to the wizard or the other person. Or if you do want to specialize in that, you can always, choose it with your background, which is really cool, which, there's a lot of things in 2024 I do want to talk about, backgrounds being one of them, but I won't get too into it. What matters is that the base that you have here of all of these skills is very good. I think that it perfectly balances a lot of the things that you would want as a fighter, and if you want to specialize in something, you can always pick it up through your background. Next is your weapon and armor proficiencies. I'll just do these together. You get everything. You get to use every simple and martial weapons, because exotic weapons don't exist anymore. And you get to use any armor, light, medium, heavy, and shields. It's the best you could get. You're not really hampered by anything. You can use any weapon you want. You can use any armor you want. And the weapons is... it's a little extra in 2024. Previously there was really no difference between something like a halberd and a glaive, but now you have weapon masteries, which do change, and I'm not going to talk too in depth about weapon masteries, despite... do I have the weapon? I do have the masteries pulled up. Okay, we can maybe talk about those. But yeah, basically each weapon has its own mastery, and being able to switch between those is really helpful. Being able to choose certain weapons that fit the playstyle you want. Maybe you want to use a quarterstaff and you want to topple people, which I do believe halberd also gets. Maybe you want to use a glaive and cleave people. No, I think it's vice versa, but no need to get too caught up with that. But yeah, basically having access to everything is good. Very few other classes, I think, get access to everything. I think probably Paladin does, but other than that, it is certainly the ideal to have access to simple and martial weapons, as well as all of the armors. All of the starting equipment isn't terribly important. Generally, whenever I play, I always take starting gold. I'm a big fan of starting gold. I mean, you start with 155 gold pieces, and look at this. You get chainmail, greatsword, flail. I don't know if I'm necessarily going to use those. Maybe I want to use a different weapon. I'm a believer in starting gold. I really love starting gold compared to these. And I know that, like, newer players, it's like, oh yeah, I'm going to use studded leather and scimitars and short swords and a longbow and arrows and quiver and dungeoneer's pack. And yeah, I think that it's really good for, like, a starting player, but I enjoy taking gold. So, becoming a fighter, yeah, you don't really need to know all these. Every class has a chart. The special section up here is weapon masteries, which we'll get into later. Excuse me, let me get a quick drink of water. But yeah, let's go ahead and just get into the core fighter features. So, the first one you get is a fighting style. You've owned your martial prowess and gained a fighting style of your choice. Whenever you gain a fighter level, you can replace the feat you chose with a different fighting style feat. I actually think that's really cool. So they do fighting styles quite a bit different in 2024 than compared to 2014. In 2024, they are feats. And I think that the biggest change, though, is that you can choose a different fighting style every time you level up. I've certainly run into the issue where I was like, oh my god, I just got a sick new magic item, but if I use it, then it's going to make my fighting style worthless. So being able to change the fighting style of your choice is really nice. I do have the fighting styles pulled up here. This isn't all of them. I do believe Tasha's added quite a few more, but if you're playing with just base 2024 rules, these are all of them. I'm not going to go over each one individually, but you have a pretty good amount of options that really... Oh Oh, they don't have unarmed. They don't have unarmed fighting or thrown weapon fighting in the 2024. That's interesting. Generally, when it comes to fighting styles, I'm a really big fan of just flat bonuses. So the thing is, in my opinion, everyone always looks at classes, I feel, at level 20. They're like, oh my god, well, you wouldn't want to take dueling. That's only up to 8 extra damage at level 20, which doesn't matter. I always make a case for dueling because you're not going to be level 20. At level 1, 2 extra damage is quite a lot of extra damage. At level 1, +2 bonus to attack rolls, I think archery is generally considered one of the best ones. But I think that's really good. I think that your fighting style definitely has an impact from as early as level 1. Something like defense, you can get such a high AC at level 1. These are kind of my 3 favorites. I generally prefer just the flat bonuses to things. Great weapon fighting, I never really I don't know, I don't really care to reroll. It feels bad if you roll like a 2 and then you roll a 1. I just personally never really use the reroll, but if you're using a 2-handed weapon, then this is probably the way to go. Basically, all of these cover the general fighting, the fighting styles. Do you favor defense? Do you favor dueling with just your 1-handed weapon or 2-weapon fighting? I think all of these are really good. And, especially something like 2-weapon fighting, I think that you feel the effects of it so early, and it really defines your playstyle. And again, one thing that's really nice about 2024 is that if you level up, then you get to switch. So let's say you were a 2-weapon fighter, you were using 2 scimitars, and then your DM gives you a flame tongue rapier. You can switch to dueling, and you can get the extra bonus, or you can switch to defense and get the extra AC. And it doesn't feel bad to be locked in with one choice. I love fighting styles. I actually really like Champion Fighter because it gives you an extra fight. Does it still give you an extra fighting style? Yeah, you get an extra fighting style at level 7 still. Sorry, tangent. But yes, I don't think there's really any like tips or tricks or anything with fighting styles. They're generally all very good, and they fit whatever playstyle you want to have very well. Okay, next is Second Wind. Oh man. So, you have a limited well of physical and mental stamina that you can draw on. As a bonus action, you can use it to regain hit points equal to 1d10 plus your fighter level. You can use this feature twice, and you regain 1 expended use when you finish a short rest, and you regain all expended uses when you finish a long rest. When you reach certain fighter levels, you gain more use of this feature as shown in the Second Wind column of the fighter features table. So you can see at level 4, you go up to 3 uses. At level 10, you go up to 4. I love Second Wind so much. I think Second Wind is, unironically, probably one of the... I think it's such a strong feature. I think that... Because even at level 4, you have basically 7d10 plus, your constitution, or in this case, your fighter levels worth of hit points. And that is kind of an absurd amount of hit points to have. Being able to, be hit by enemies over and over and rolling to heal, and, it always feels bad to roll a 1 on this. But at the same time, it feels spectacular to roll a 10 on this. And you get 1 use back on a short rest. So you can basically be using this at least once every combat. If you get into a particularly scary combat, you can use 2. You can just use this. You can use your Second Winds as you see fit. And just because of the way that you get them back, it never feels like you're gonna... It's not one of those resources where you're scared like, oh, I don't want to use these in case I need these later. Granted, that is assuming you're playing in a normal type of short rest game. I know some games are super against short rests. I don't know. I just think that, like, even at level 5, getting 1d10 plus 5 healing on a bonus action is so strong, in my opinion. I really love it. I cannot really put into words how good I think Second Wind is. And of course, it's on a bonus action, which, unless you're playing a dual weapon fighter or your subclass is giving you a certain thing to do on your bonus actions, you're generally kind of not using your bonus actions a lot. You're more focused on your actions. And so using your bonus action to regain that health is so important. And, you know, one thing I love to talk about on this channel is the flavor of things. And I mean, there's just so many ways. You could maybe do it like a Bloodborne type of character. Maybe you're an agile hunter and your form of Second Wind is injecting a blood vial into your leg. Or, you know, maybe you're a holy warrior that took cleric magic initiate. And this is just a type of healing magic you use on your own. Or you could even be a rugged outlander who basically just shrugs off the damage done. I think Second Wind is really cool. Personally, whenever I build fighters, and this is just a flavor thing, that's not super related, but I always expressly like to ask my DM that even if I get hit, you know, my character doesn't get necessarily hit. Does that make sense? So, like, even though they'll take their HP damage, it's more of their armor is getting battered. And I think that using Second Wind as a way to, like, yeah, just kind of lock in. As a way to lock in and conquer what is ahead of you. It's just so cool. I just think it's such a good and almost always useful ability. I don't think there's really going to be many times where Second Wind isn't useful. And we'll talk a little later. I feel like that's my phrase for today. We'll talk later. We will talk a little later about how useful Second Wind is, especially in 2024. Alright, next is weapon masteries. Your training with weapons allows you to use the mastery properties of 3 kinds of simpler martial weapons of your choice. Whenever you finish a long rest, you can practice weapon drills and change one of those weapon choices. When you reach certain fighter levels, you gain the ability to use the mastery properties of more kinds of weapons, as shown in the weapon mastery column of the fighter features table. So at level 4, it goes up to 4. At level 10, it goes up to 5, and at level 16, it goes up to 6 different weapons. Now, weapon masteries are really cool. I love weapon masteries a lot. I think that weapon masteries are some of the best things that they added for martials. I do have the list here. You have things like cleaving, and one thing that is worth noting is that, oh gosh, I'm sorry, I should have probably looked up the rules for pulling out a weapon, but I do believe unsheathing a weapon is a bonus action. So, you know, if you really wanted, you could, say, in one turn, you could use, you know, push on a creature and then drop your weapon and then hit it with a weapon with slow. I do think that the synergy a lot of these weapons have is really good. And even if you're not trying to do things within the same turn, doing various different effects across different turns is really useful. You know, maybe someone is getting on top of your wizard. You can go up and you can topple them. You can force them to make a con save, and if they fail, they're prone. And it gives your wizard a chance to get away. Since, you know, prone restricts their movement and gives them disadvantage on that attack of opportunity, it's really strong. You know, having slow on a crossbow is really useful because it makes it harder for people to close the distance to you in the back line, and they'll probably have to resort to smacking you or your barbarian or your paladin. Sap is very useful as well. A lot of these are just very useful for really helping out both yourself and your party. You know, using a longsword, and I think such an important thing to note is you look up here at cleave and it says you can make this extra attack only once per turn. None of these other ones, and nowhere up here, does it specify that you can only use them once per turn. So if you're next to 2 enemies at level 5 and you have 2 attacks, you can sap both of them and then give 2 creatures disadvantage on their next attack roll. Yeah, I'm a really big fan of weapon mastery. I super like them, and just the fact that you get to use them every single turn is so useful. You know, you have something like Nick here. When you make the extra attack of the light property, you can make it as part of the attack action instead of a bonus action. If you're using dual scimitars, you can attack, and still have your bonus action. And, you know, like I just said with Second Wind, maybe you do want... I actually don't know if scimitar gets Nick. I think it does. Sorry. But you do want to use your bonus action to, you know, use that Second Wind or use something else. I don't know. And I think getting such a huge variety of weapons to use it with is also very nice. I've actually found myself, you know, you think, oh, I got 3 or 4, that's so many. But, you know, when you're using different types of weapons and crossbows, and again, maybe your DM gives you a certain weapon that you want to use, being able to just pick those up and change them on long rest is really impactful. And weapon mastery, I should express, isn't necessarily a fighter exclusive thing, but fighters definitely get the most options for weapon masteries. And so they will always be prepared in some way for whatever fight might approach them. I don't have too much else to say about weapon mastery. Okay, next is Action Surge. Action Surge. Probably one of the most, probably one of the most infamous abilities, I suppose. Going back to 2014, the classic reason to take a 2-level dip into fighter for just about everyone. So, Action Surge. You can push yourself beyond your normal limits for a moment. On your turn, you can take 1 additional action except the magic action. Once you use this feature, you can't do so until you finish a short or long rest. Starting at level 17, you can use it twice before a rest, but only once on a turn. An entire extra action is kind of crazy. It especially synergizes with Fighter because Fighter, you know, they have extra attacks. So if you use this at level 5, you're going to be getting 4 attacks in 1 turn. That is 4 opportunities for damage riders. If you have something like a flame tongue, that is 4 opportunities to inflict your weapon masteries. It is so much, but it's of course not limited to just that. You can use your Action Surge to dash so that you can get in position and still have an action left over to maybe grapple or shove someone. You know, you can use that extra action to help an ally. If you're fighting a giant spider and your DM is like, oh yeah, it takes an action to cut someone out, you can use that Action Surge and feel like you didn't really waste your turn helping someone. Not that helping someone is a waste. Very important to note. No, Action Surge, just in a game like Dungeons & Dragons, where something like the action economy is such a sacred balance, being able to just give yourself an extra action is really kind of bonkers. And in 2024, they actually did nerf this. As you can see, you can't use the magic action, which, you know, I guess they really didn't want wizards taking a 2-level dip into fighter and then just be able to double fireball, which, I don't know. Personally, I think they should just be able to do it, but that's just me. No, it's hard to... You can't really quantify how strong Action Surge is. Well, I guess you can. It's really freaking strong. Action Surge is certainly, I think, one of the best abilities in the entire game. And maybe I'm biased, but I do say that a lot about a lot of the fighter things that they do. But no, really, I do think I think Action Surge is one of those things that every class would never say no to, right? Like having an extra entire action to do dashing or disengaging or dodging or attacking or anything like that. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think any class would complain about having that, and fighters are lucky enough to have that. And, you know, this doesn't even get into using items, right? You know, maybe dropping ball bearings or caltrops or slapping on those dimensional shackles that you never want to use because you don't want to waste your entire turn using it. Things like that. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to really find a lot to say other than it's really good. Okay. With that, we can next go into Tactical Mind, which is a new feature in 2024 for the fighter. You can push yourself beyond your normal limits for a moment. On your turn, you can take... Oh, I'm sorry. I'm reading Action Surge. Tactical Mind. You have a mind for tactics on and off the battlefield. When you fail an ability check, you can spend a use of your second wind to push yourself towards success. Rather than regaining hit points, you roll 1d10 and add the number rolled to the ability check, potentially turning it into a success. If the check still fails, the use of second wind isn't expended. So, I think this is why they're giving you more second wind uses, because you have something like Tactical Mind, which I love. I love Tactical Mind. I think it is such a great addition to Fighter, because one of the complaints about Fighter in 2014 is, unless you specifically build for him, they don't do a lot outside of combat. You know, many people will build their fighters specifically for combat. But Tactical Mind now makes it so that you basically get a short rest bardic inspiration. Which is kind of bonkers. A D10 is not a small number. And one thing about this is it specifically says when you fail an ability check. So you could roll let's say your DM tells you to roll a persuasion check, you roll a 14 and they say, oh, you fail. At that point, you can determine, you want to use my Tactical Mind. I want to see if I can get this this persuasion check to work. And you roll a 7, you roll a 21, and they're like, okay, well, you succeed. Awesome. You use the feature, you succeeded on your thing, but if you roll, say, a 2, and you get up to a 16, the DM says, oh, you still fail, your second wind isn't expended. So you can use it on your next ability check. And I just think, not to sound like a broken record, but this is such a good ability. Being able to not auto-guarantee success, but being able to add up to 10 to an ability check is pretty freaking bonkers. And it also makes it so that second wind is no longer a combat only skill. You could have 3 in-game days that you're spending in a town trying to gather information or engage in diplomacy or something like that, and one of your core skills, your second wind, is still going to be useful. You're going to be able to do this 2, 3, 4, 5 times a day. You can take short rests throughout the day and get a usage back. And so I do really like this skill. In something like an Adventurers League setting, maybe it would be very useful for... And I'm sorry, I've never played Adventurers League, so I could be talking out of my butt, and if I am, feel free to correct me. But in an Adventurers League setting, maybe you're just exploring. Take this on a perception check or an investigation check. Put it onto a, any sort of athletics or acrobatics check. It's so useful. I think that Tactical Mind is, you will probably never go through an entire day without using all of your second winds. Even if you're, traversing the wild, if you're trying to uncover, trying to play the role of a detective, Tactical Mind just turns second wind from an already very good combat ability to an exceptionally good combat and out of combat ability. So I love the inclusion of Tactical Mind a lot. I think that it is a spectacular, amazing addition to the arsenal that a fighter comes with. And it even helps with like the role-playing aspect of maybe your character is an acolyte and you roll a religion check and you want to be good at these religion checks. You can always have Tactical Mind kind of in your back pocket to add a D10 to your religion checks. If you already failed them, that is. If you succeed, you don't even need them. And if you still fail, they're not even expended. So I think Tactical Mind is fantastic. I think it's really awesome. Subclass, I don't really want to talk too much about subclass because that would be a separate video. The PHB 2024 options are Battlemaster, Champion, Eldritch Knight, and Psy Warrior. Yeah, that's it. Okay. Level 4 ASI. So normally I wouldn't talk about ability score improvements because you get them at levels, 4, 8, 12, 16, not 19 anymore. You get epic boons then. You will notice that the fighter actually gets 2 extra ones at level 6 and level 14. And generally the more impactful one is the one you get at level 6. because of this, if you take normal point buy or something, you will be the first person generally to get to 20 in a stat. You will be the first one to have a 20 strength or a 20 dex or, God forbid, a 20 intelligence if you really want to. Or a 20 wisdom. You know, who am I to stop you? Which is actually kind of a huge deal because you're doing that 2 levels before anyone else. Alternatively, this allows you to take, 2 feats if you really want to. You know, and fighters are not short for feat options. You know, things like crossbow expert or sharpshooter, which did get nerfed, but great weapon master, all of these, you know, all of these awesome feats, being able to have more options, and this is kind of ties into my love for fighter. And the reason that I think fighter is so good at being able to fill really any role that you want it to, because you get these extra feats that allow you to do these extra things. Oh goodness dear, what is it? It's the I'm drawing a blank. What is, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. It's the other supplement. One of the classic D&D realms. I that has the Knights of it has the incremental feats where it requires you have a feat to get your next feat to get your next feat. I'm kicking myself because I can't think of it. But, you know, those, you're going to be getting those feats so much quicker. They're so strong. And I think that being able to just choose more options is always good, especially with a class like fighter, which, you know, with all of this, all of that we've gone over, fighter is a very open-ended sort of class. You know, second wind, anyone can really benefit from second wind. Anyone can benefit from action surge. Any martial can benefit from weapon mastery. And so being able to have these extra options with these extra feats, or just pumping them into ability score improvements, I do think that it particularly complements fighter, because fighter, it's not getting specialized things like divine smite or like hunter's mark or like sneak attack. You know, being able to pick up your extra options through feats, in my opinion, is something that I really love. So, yeah, the extra ASIs are just, well, I mean, frankly, they're just better than the other classes. But it's not better just because it's better. I think it's important to kind of understand why the extra ASIs work for fighter and not so much for other classes. Why fighter, in general, kind of does need that extra, you know, those extra options to really dig itself into its hole and fill the niche that it wants to fill. So, yeah. Next is extra attack. So extra attack, you attack twice instead of once when you take the attack action. That's it. That's pretty good. You know, everyone always kind of makes the jokes of, oh my gosh, you know, the wizard, they can cast fireball now, and the warlock, they can charm entire swarms of people. The cleric can destroy hordes of undead, and now I get to swing my sword one extra time. Which, you know, I don't necessarily think that's a valid complaint to have if you're a martial. Being able to swing your sword or shoot your bow an extra time, it actually does kind of amount to a lot. You know, you take something like a fireball. Let's say, okay, let's take 2 level 5 characters. A fireball takes one of 2 resources that you only get back on a long rest. And it deals 8d6 damage, which is a lot, you know. I think it averages at 27.5. And sure, while your fighter will only be able to get that extra attack, they're doing that every single turn that they are attacking. And they're dealing an extra 1d8, 1d10, 1d12, plus strength or dex damage. So the extra attack is actually really strong. And I know it's kind of silly to think I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about extra attack. But, like, I think it's kind of underrated, which is insane to say. But people, I think, put all of these crazy spells that you get at 3rd level on a pedestal. And yeah, you know, things like fly and hypnotic pattern and fireball are really strong, but they are resource gated. You know, you're not gated at all with the extra attack you get. And your extra attack can even be used for things like grappling or shoving or any of that. So while it does feel kind of silly, you know, I'm not going to lie, to say that extra attack is kind of underrated, I do think that people don't really give it the credit it deserves. You know, it is doubling your damage output, assuming you hit. And, you know, assuming you miss once and hit twice, well, you know, if before that would have just been an attack you missed. It's something, you know, you play a rogue and play a martial that doesn't have extra attack, and you definitely feel how bad it feels to not have that extra attack. Versus playing like a fighter or a paladin or a ranger or a barbarian or a monk. You know, you have that extra attack, it feels so nice to get. Okay. Sorry, this is a bit of a longer video than I do, and I haven't done them in a while, so I need to make sure I'm drinking enough water. Okay, next is Tactical Shift. Whenever you activate your second one of the bonus action, you can move up to half your speed without provoking opportunity attacks. I mean, it's good. No, it's really good. You know, you're using your second wind to get a heal and just getting extra movement, generally 15 feet. Sometimes 20, depending on what you're doing. Without provoking opportunity attacks is really good. It lets you get in between enemies and your allies. It lets you flank an enemy. It lets you move from their front line to their back line. And all of this is while you're healing yourself for that 10d10. 1d10 plus 5 at this level. So, it really is just making second wind an even more versatile option. Because now it's like, let's say you have to sprint 45 feet to get to an enemy. Oh man, I really don't want to use my action surge to dash. Well, now you can use your bonus action in your second wind to close that extra feet, 15 feet, and then use your action surge for an extra attack or something. So, yeah, I mean, Tactical Shift is a pretty awesome, in my opinion, ability. Excuse me. Sorry. It just does what it does. It makes second wind even better. It turns second wind from like an A tier ability to like a very high A tier ability. I don't know. Personally, I'd put second wind in like S tier, but it just adds so many options. I think that second wind is already super awesome, so to be able to move half your speed without provoking opportunity attacks is even more awesome. Okay, next is Tactical Master. There is a bit of a gap here, but between this you get level 6 another feat, level 7 your subclass, level 8 another feat, and then level 9 Tactical Master. So when you attack with a weapon whose mastery property you can replace that property with the push, sap, or slow property for that attack. Push, sap, slow. So push, if you hit a creature with this weapon, you can push the creature up to 10 feet straight away. Sap, if you hit a creature with this weapon, it gains disadvantage on its next attack roll. And slow, if you hit a creature with this weapon and deal damage to it, you reduce its speed by 10. Lots of really good synergy here. Taking, let's say, you want to push an enemy and keep them away. You can use any weapon and you can hit them once with an attack to slow them and then twice with an attack to push them away. In that case, if you do succeed on both of them, you don't have to use, say, Tactical Shift to move without provoking opportunity attacks. You can use this as a way to control the battlefield. And one thing that I have always wished that a fighter was better at was controlling the battlefield. Because it, for the most part, it feels kind of natural for the fighter to be on the battlefield and to be the one kind of in charge of combat. The one who is most attuned to fighting. So having this, and especially having it on something like a glaive or a halberd with reach, it really does kind of turn you into a control machine. Being able to push enemies around and slow enemies and give them disadvantage. It's really, really strong. It is important. Sorry, I just had to reread this. It is important to note that it is for that attack. So let's say you are using something with topple, which I believe the halberd gets. You can slow them to reduce their speed by 10, and then you can topple them. And with that, they have to use half their move speed to get up. And then, you know, it's really insane levels of control that you can use. You basically have 4 mastery properties you can use with any weapon, and then you can slot in that 4th one. You know, let's say you want to have Vex. You know, Vex works really well with this. You use a rapier, you hit with that first attack, you apply Vex, and then that second attack you have advantage on, and you could put push on it, you can put sap on it, you can put slow on it. You know, Vex and sap makes you an absurdly strong duelist. It makes it so your attacks will 50% of the time have advantage, and their attacks most of the time will have disadvantage. You can take, say, you know, something like Graze even. Wait, never mind. No, I don't think Graze counts. You could take Cleave. I think Cleave would work. You can make a melee attack roll with the weapon against a second creature of choice. On a hit, the second creature takes a weapon's input. I'm pretty sure Cleave would work, because you are making an attack with it. The opportunities you have, especially with extra attack, and, you know, I'm not going to spend time talking about 2 extra attacks. You get 2 extra attacks later. And Omega spoilers, at level 20, you get 3 extra attacks. You know, the idea of toppling, pushing, sapping, and slowing someone in a single turn is, I mean, that is just crazy levels of control. So, I do think Tactical Master is something you look at it, you're like, oh, that's neat. But when you really sit there to think about it and how it synergizes with extra attack, it makes Fighter such a strong battlefield controller, because these little effects add up so much. You know, the little effect of pushing someone 10 feet away, of slowing someone of giving someone disadvantage, it all adds up, because similar to what I said with extra attack, it's something you're doing each and every turn. Every single turn, you are applying these effects. And so it gets to be quite a lot to deal with. I love Tactical Master. I think it's such a cool level 9 ability. And I've actually personally never gotten to a level where I could use it. But, you know, using the, God, I don't know, just the idea of using like a crossbow and pushing and slowing and applying all of these is so awesome to me. All right, we're getting close to the end. So next is Indomitable, or if you fail a saving throw, you can re-roll it with a bonus equal to your fighter level. You must use the new roll, and you can't use this feature again until you finish a long rest. You can use this feature twice before a long rest starting at level 13, and 3 times before a long rest starting at level 17. So earlier, way earlier, I talked about saving throws. I talked about how, you know, for your things like your wisdom and your intelligence and your charisma saving throws, you'll get something later that can help with that. This is it. Strength saving throws, like I said, are never necessarily feel super make or break it. Whereas those mental saves generally do feel that way. You know, an enemy uses dominate person on you, and you're like, oh crap, I don't think my proficiency is enough to make this. That's what Indomitable is for. At this point, you would roll your dice and you would add 9 to the roll. You not only get advantage on the roll, you know, you can tell your DM, oh, I rolled a 12 on my first die. And then they're like, oh, I'm sorry, that's a fail. I'd like to use Indomitable. And all of a sudden, you're adding 9. An extra 9 to that save. Indomitable is just such an awesome ability. A lot of the times it kind of does turn into like a legendary resistance, because granted, you know, at level 9 you're probably fighting something with a DC 17, DC 18, but that turns from having like a 15 or 10% chance to succeed that save into having like a 60% chance to make that save. And that number only goes up the more you level up. I think a lot of the times we've run into those scary situations where it has been make or break for a save, and Indomitable just makes making those saves so much more comfortable. It makes it so much less scary to be faced with the concept of something like maze or dominate person or hold person or any of those kinds of spells. I love Indomitable. Name one fighter ability Jin does not love. No, I think that Indomitable is just really strong. It's kind of similar to Action Surge and Second Wind, where again it's just this feature that doesn't feel super specific to fighter, but at the same time is kind of iconic for fighter. You know, it's something that every class would love. A wizard wouldn't love Hunter's Mark, a sorcerer wouldn't love Divine Smite, and you know, I don't think a fighter would care about the wizard thing. Arcane Recovery. But every class would love something like Indomitable. And it's this thing that it's like the quality of the blank easel, right? Like having something like Indomitable just makes the quality even higher to just build on. It's these small little like abilities that are always useful, and that is what is so defining about fighter, in my opinion, is that you have these small abilities that are just all so useful. And I love it so much. I think it's fantastic. I love Indomitable. Okay. Sorry, I'm reaching the end of my rope. You can see here, I spoiled it, but at level 11 you get 2 extra attacks. Last thing we're going to be talking about is studied attacks. So you study your opponent and learn from each attack you make. If you make an attack roll against a creature and miss, you have advantage on your next attack roll against that creature before the end of your next turn. Yeah, it's good. It's good. It's kind of just a more guaranteed way to get your weapon masteries on, to get your push sap slows and all of those things. You know, at this point, you are making 3 attacks in a turn. So if you miss that first one, your second one, if you are, let's go back to the example of using a rapier with Vex, you're probably going to, you know, you'll have advantage on that attack, and then you'll have advantage on the third attack. If you miss your second attack, you know, you can still combo with your first attack's mastery property. If you miss your third attack, well, you get to start next turn with advantage on your attack. I mean, getting advantage on your attack is always good. It sucks to miss with an attack, and so being able to mitigate how bad that feels is really nice. I think studied attacks is, I mean, it's a fun ability. It does what it does. It makes the fighter more consistent, and I think if there's anything we've learned, it's that fighter is a very consistent class. It very consistently does what it does. It attacks, and it attacks, and it succeeds on important saves, and it heals itself, and it, you know. So I think that studied attacks is a really nice ability to have. Just to increase the consistency of fighter. And then, yeah, after that, really all you have is your extra feats, your subclass features. At level 19, you get your epic boon. And at level 20, for your capstone, you get 3 attacks. So you can attack 4 times whenever you take the attack action, which is pretty freaking crazy. That is a lot of attacks to make, a lot of masteries to apply. It's really good. Okay, so in conclusion, again, I love fighter. I'm so biased towards fighter. I think fighter is definitely my favorite class in the game. And even taking the rose-tinted glasses off, I just think fighter is really solid. I think fighter serves as such a solid base for so many things that you may want to do. I think with the amount of options you get from, you know, origin feats and things like that, you can, because, you know, now you don't have to play a variant human to get these variant options at level 1. You can pick an acolyte, and you can take things like cure wounds and it's been a while since I've played Dungeons and Dragons, and you can take you know, things like Spare the Dying to fill a certain niche. You can take the healer feat if you really want to and use healer kits to heal your party. You can take Tough to serve as a huge tank. I think you have all these options that you can apply onto the fighter, and with all of its abilities being just such strong and always useful abilities no matter what, I think that fighter as a package just soars. I think the fighter in 2024 is incredibly strong. I think that it's incredibly varied in what it can do. And I think that really anything that you would want to do in terms of a, you know, any sort of martial character you can do with a fighter. And, you know, I'm a huge fan of reflavoring things. If you want, you can take Battlemaster and, you know, change your maneuvers to things like magical flourishes. You can, you know, go an Eldritch Knight and instead of using magic, have them be tinkering if you want to have like an artificer type character. You have so many options with fighter, and I do think it's such a disservice that people groan and side-eye when you say you're going to play a fighter, because fighter is just such an open book that you can really use to write your own story. But yeah, that's going to be it for this video. If you somehow made it to the end here, I really appreciate you. And I am sorry again that it's been so long since I've made a video. I got really burnt out from content creation, and even right now I'm sort of going through some personal stuff, but I did want to get a video out. If you enjoyed it, please feel free to comment, like. If you didn't enjoy it, feel free to comment, and, well, I guess you can't dislike, but, and yeah, hopefully I'll see you guys again soon. Bye-bye.